Hi everybody, this is Vanquished Angel and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm covering how to build a really good budget PC for gaming. And so before I get too much into this, one of the things that I'll do is you'll notice that this is a small form factor PC. That's definitely what it is. And there's a reason why I buy those, because they're energy efficient, but they're also business computers, and that's kind of important. And it kind of also helps future-proof them a little bit. Now you can find these small form factors prefab PCs for cheap on like eBay or Amazon. Businesses go out of business and then they liquidate their products. So unfortunately they went out of business, but bonus for you because you can pick these up usually for $100. And then usually they won't all have their maximum processor in there. So after I find a make and model in my price range, about $100, I will buy it, but before I buy it, I look up the quick specs. For HP, because this is the HP Elite 8200, I look up the quick specs because then I can see the maximum processor that it can hold, how much memory it can hold, how much hard drive space that it can hold. And I look that stuff up. And this way I know, so I can look for its components and see how readily available they are. And the cost of those as well. So in the case of this, I bought this case for like $100 many years ago. This right now is 7 years old. But the quick spec says that it could handle an i7 processor, an i7 second generation. So specifically it said the i7 2700, which at the time were really cheap processors. And so I was able to pick one up for super cheap and put it in here. So this is an i7 2700, which is a very good gaming processor, and I'll get to that in a little bit. It was way ahead of its time. Most i7s are ahead of this time. So if you're going to build an older computer, get your hands on an i7 processor if you can, or one that can take, if you buy a prefab, which I advise because you're recycling, but get an i7. And then the RAM. I look up how much RAM it can hold. Now this is the part where I make it a little wasteful because I future plan, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But the i7 2700 could handle 32 gigs of RAM. No game right now needs 32 gigs of RAM. The only time you really need 32 gigs of RAM is video editing. Okay? And even right now, that's pretty not too big of a deal. So I'm going to pull a RAM chip out here. And I'll look up the type of RAM, and I'll look up how much that costs too. So upgrading to 32 gigs of RAM on an older computer was maybe another $100. So we're up to possibly, I want to say like $230. We'll say $250 for good measure, because this was years ago. And then I buy these little heat sinks. Older computers tend to overheat. Now these heat sinks might just be frivolous, but they're only like $1. You can get them super cheap. So I put these little heat sinks on the RAM chips because, they are older, so they tend to generate more heat, and we're using a small form factor PC. They tend to trap heat a little bit more. So that helps the RAM dissipate the heat. Now if I can get this RAM chip back in there, I'm putting it in wrong. All right, so make sure if you're going to replace the processor, which I almost always do in every prefab that I build, get a good thermal paste and make sure you have the right tools to take that off. Take your time, know what you're doing, and when you start touching computer components, this part is grounded. The outer case, make sure you touch that case so you're not shocking anything. I'm not really getting into depth here, and I'm kind of being careful, but I'm using my bare hands to show this to you. You're going to want to make sure you're grounded. Or use those special static gloves, because you can really ruin stuff if you don't. So the other bonus to using these for gaming PCs is that they used to be business PCs, so they can handle stronger processors, but they're also super energy efficient. So the maximum this power supply can handle is 240 watts. This is approximately 95 watts, or maybe a little less than, because I think I went with the more energy efficient model. I probably did. So you have the RAM, and I think the RAM is about 10 watts. And you have this, which we'll say 95 watts. And then you have this, which is approximately, this one here, I'm going to say 75 watts, though I don't think it is. So 75 in that's already what? Like 100 and, I don't even know. I'm not doing maths right now this early. About 160 watts, I think. And all together, so we're at 240. And then these, the green ones, are 5 watts each. So that's 10. And then you got, so about 160, 170, and then another 10. So we're at about 200 watts. And then whatever else this uses. So you're less than the power supply is the point. And so taking on these energy efficient things actually helps save on your power supply as well. Now, to note over here, I use the slots of the computer for expansions. Since it's an older computer, it doesn't have USB 3.0 slots. And these are rare to find these days, but I landed one when they were first new back in 2010. And this is a Fresco Logic USB 3.0 slot made for PCI. The old white PCI. Because this computer from 2011 has one of those old white PCI slots. And I figure, why not use it? So that's my USB 3.0. Now, the thing with USB 3.0 is it's really not that important, so don't feel bad if your computer doesn't have it, because most peripherals don't actually use it yet. Maybe high-intensity cameras or hard disk drives transferring files benefit from it, but like your keyboard, your mouse, none of that is really going to benefit from it, and a lot of webcams don't either. They use the USB 2.0 specification. This card right here is a mini PCI, PCI-X or Express slot. It's also USB 3.0, but I don't use it. So I'm thinking about replacing that with Intel Turbo Cache, since now there's a driver for it in Git. And then, of course, you have your graphics lane right here, and there's two. There's one black and one white. My card is the... I left it out. So you can see that right here. There's one black, one white. The graphics card will automatically cover the white one. So it plugs into the black one for the main part. Some cards require 2 slots. So there. Now we're going to push that back into place. All right. And then we got to get that into alignment because it's not going. And then, so I utilize those expansion slots for other peripherals. And then most of my peripherals are plugged into the USB 2.0. I don't know why it's giving me attitude, but I don't like it. Okay, so as long as it closes, we're good. All right, so there's that. So that's what I use those for. So I have USB 3.0, and I have my graphics card. That's going to get thrown away, though. And then I have the 2 terabyte hard drives, and then this, and the processor. This probably totally cost, around $250 completely. So not a bad deal. These are refurbished hard drives. And I didn't have those right away. I used my old hard drives from the other computer, so I saved up to get those. Now, how does this work as a gaming PC is that when you buy a graphics card and a processor, they don't always equal each other out. So a lot of times when you're making a budget PC, one of your biggest enemies is going to be the number crunchers, the number junkies. You're going to read forums, and there's going to be people that are addicted to numbers. Like, we got to have 128 gigs of RAM and blah, blah, blah. And they'll spit all this stuff off. The truth is nothing takes advantage of that RAM unless you're doing some major video editing for a security company with video cameras. It's not really worth it. And does it future-proof? Oh, yeah, it does. And I'll get to that in a minute. But is it really worth it? No. Most of them are just wasting their money. They overdo with the latest, greatest processor that no game can take advantage of. I mean, yeah, games take advantage of multiple cores, but really, no game needs one that strong. They could have saved themselves a crap ton of money because, and by the time they actually do get to games that are going to need one that strong, they're going to have replaced that computer probably at least 6 years before. So they're not really using all that stuff, and I'll explain. So getting back to this, the graphics card. This graphics card is perfect for this machine because it doesn't require any extra power. It's powered right through the slot. The slot is limited at 75 watts. This card is the GeForce 1050 Ti overclocked edition with 4 gigabytes of RAM. Now this is great for 1080p gaming, which is right where I'm at. I don't have the biggest computer monitor, and actually it's not a computer monitor, it's actually a TV. And it's 10 watts because it's energy efficient. So this card is perfect for this. And I will always check online, usually Game Debate or something, to try to match the CPU to the graphics card. Now this card is brand new. Of course it came out maybe like a year or so ago, but it's brand new. And this processor is not brand new. But, well, it was brand new to me when I got it. But this processor is strong enough to handle anything that this card puts out. So this second generation i7 processor can handle the graphics pumped out from this card, and this card can pretty much handle any game at 1080p, which is where my monitor is. So it's perfect. The 750 Ti didn't have any problems either. So this is kind of how you make a budget gaming PC. If I need to go to 4K, I probably could. It might not game very well, but it probably wouldn't game too bad for the later games, but I'm not going to be there, at least not for a long time. So you don't, and then now we're going to move on to the RAM. Now I maxed out my RAM on here at 32 gigs. The truth is, you won't use it. I don't use it. Now if I were in Windows, I'd use a little bit more, maybe up to 16 gigs. Right now, games in that aren't even breaking 8 yet. And this computer here is 7 years old in its shell, the casing. And so, let alone using 32 gigs, but that's the benefit of a business PC, which is why I'm stressing that. Business PCs are made a little bit ahead of their time because they're a lot of times used for processing security camera images and video editing, which requires heavy RAM and heavy processors. So me upgrading to a newer graphics card that can handle the latest greatest games, the processor is good to go. So it was future-proofed. In essence, I will be able to use this computer for years to come. I have plenty of RAM. It's not the fastest RAM. It's 1,333 megahertz, I think. Or is it 13,000? I don't know. It might be the 13,000 one. But it's been a long time since I looked it up. But anyway, again, this is where number junkies kind of fail. Not only is that much RAM even excessive by today's standards, even Windows computers with the latest, greatest games don't go above 8 gigabytes. 16 is enough for video editing. 32, I'm good for a while. But the speed part, the number crunchers, again, they're going to you need 27,000 megahertz RAM. No, you don't. The reason is, tests have shown the last time I checked, anything above 16 doesn't do anything for you. As a matter of fact, it starts sloping down. So it loses its benefit. The faster it gets, the more errors it makes, and then it has to correct those errors. So there's kind of a crossroads when it comes to, the last time I checked that was 16,000 megahertz or whatever it is, or 1,600. I suppose I should look that up. But this is why you don't always want to have the latest, greatest, blah. It's not going to give you a whole lot of edge, but it's going to cost you a whole lot of money. So this is how I build a budget gaming PC. Eventually I will be investing in Intel Turbo Cache because the Caviar digital green hard drives are a little bit slower. They're like 3 gigabytes a second. SATA 2, I think. I don't really remember anymore. But it's not where it makes that much of a big deal to me. The Intel Turbo Cache will help with that. Alright, hopefully that gave you some ideas. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you, and have a good day. And then there is one thing also that I forgot to cover on my building a gaming PC, is that a lot of computers, mine included, are old enough that they still contain these PS2 ports, I think that's what they called them, The ports are very old, but they hung around for a long time. And the reason why I use them is because, and this might be more pertinent on older PCs or might not even matter so much anymore because processors are so much stronger, but these interrupt the CPU when a button is pressed. So you press a button, they like knock on the CPU and say, hey, button press, pay attention. Whereas the USB plug-in ones, the CPU has to check the USB port, and oftentimes does so thousands of times a second. So the CPU is constantly being interrupted by the CPU or the USB keyboards and mouse that are plugged into it. Now this is true for USB 1 and USB 2. Now USB 3 I've been told is different, but I don't know, I'd have to look into it. I mean, I have a USB 3 card, as you saw, but still I prefer these. Now the difference is these can only handle 6 button presses per second. I don't know about the keyboard one, but these are solely dedicated just for that. They're not dedicated to anything else. USB ports are universal. They can handle more per second, but they rely on constant interruptions of the processor when they're plugged in. So I prefer these kind. But many people, especially new ones, it's new agey, and of course the number junkies are going to want USB ports. USB mice and keyboards. However, you're not going to press a button 1,000 times a second. There's no human on the face of this planet that's going to do that. I mean, we'd be hard pressed to do it 6 times per second, which is what these can handle. So that's my take on that. And oftentimes you can find these for cheap, at least while they're still around. All right, have a good day.